Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. And boy, I just cannot express how much I believe this may be the biggest video I have ever made. I understand that that sounds like a lot of hype, but if you followed me a long time, I honestly don't think I've ever hyped a video. If you can catch me, then maybe remind me. But otherwise, generally, I just share the content and I trust it's going to be valuable. But this time, I just lock in, guys, because I feel this is vitally important. Not only if you're in AMC, but I'm really hoping this reaches some ears of whether it is skeptics, whether there are some folks in power. I believe this is a message that needs to be seen. I think it's very, very important. It's going to be fact based, it's going to be data backed. And I just think it's critically important that the whole nation and frankly the world understands the journey of AMC, what we've gone through, and how phenomenally big this honestly is. So we're going to look at that. We're going to go through. I ask you to stay with me through this. If you're new to me, just a quick couple things about me so we can get to the data. I have a background in business. I was at Nike for 21 years, pretty much a supply chain and operations guy. I have two masters in business. One's the MBA, and then one is I got a master's in supply chain. So I'm not a stock expert. I'm not a finance expert, although I did work pretty deeply in finance in a lot of projects and obviously in supply chain finance. But I have been in AMC since sort of day one, and I'd like to think at least maybe some of that background and education gave me enough intelligence to be able to analyze data. I certainly did a lot of analyzing data in my career. And so that's my background. That's where I've been. I have been on the entire AMC journey, started obviously on Twitter or now X, and then I started this YouTube account at the end of 2022 when I wanted to start talking about business fundamentals for AMC and the thesis. And so that's what today's going to be, is kind of a deeper dive into some data that I think paints the picture of why AMC really is that big, why it's so problematic for some very bad people, and what we've gone through. Pardon a little bit of noise for 1 second. I'm going to just crack open a bubbly, water here. Just water, guys, not beer this time, because I'll have to share a lot of information. So I just, I'll need a drink now and then. Okay, let's dive in. So first off, let me just ground everybody, especially if you're newer here. This is a slide I've shared a couple times, so I'll go through it quickly, but I really just want to paint an overall picture, and all of this is going to go together. That the first thing you should know, and you could go back, find a couple videos where I talk about this slide, basically just kind of, a couple videos ago. Around the blue line is our price over time in AMC. And in particular, you can see that, just kind of ever cascading down, and then this flatlining for the last couple of years. But, if you think about a short thesis, shorts are the opposite of buying long. You want to short high and then cover low. If you're long, you want to buy low, sell high. Shorts are just the opposite of that. So just a very, very simple view, what you should see is shorts have been acting counterintuitively, kind of anti-logic with AMC, because as the price has gotten lower and lower, the amount of shorts in terms of just a absolute count of shares has skyrocketed. That is the opposite of a normal short, especially if the business is improving, which AMC has been improving significantly. And I've got all the data to back that up, that on this channel. You could see, even just if you wanted, go check out Adam Aaron was on CNBC today and talked to the business and how much it has been improving and how much it's going to be improving on the horizon. I will address one thing here. I noticed overnight the amount of shares shorted dipped significantly. I'm not showing that latest number just yet. I want to go analyze that. So this number is as of July 15th, the reported numbers from July 15th. I'm not really buying that the amount of shares shorted could have dipped so radically without price action. So I need some time to go analyze that. But this is very real as of July 15th. This is showing you kind of almost 5 years of behavior. And what you need to notice too is we're going to dive in on this video to a lot of things around FTX, to a lot of things around, if you were around, you know that AMC had another ticker called APE. We're going to talk about that. And notice that the spike in shorts really kind of was tied to the timing of, you can see this dip here. This is when APE converted to AMC. So AMC had this whole lawsuit dragged out, which is, by the way, also a hallmark of abusive shorts. They like to embroil companies in never-ending lawsuits, and that definitely happened to us. So there was this long lawsuit that AMC did win, so we were vindicated. And then I'm going to show you again here as we go through just the entire history. We're not just going to talk about that conversion, but we are going to show some radical behavior that happened in the marketplace that points to a lot of fraud, manipulation, and corruption, and people turning a blind eye. But you can see that basically from the time of that conversion, it was right here, you had this massive dip in price coinciding with a massive spike in shorts. I don't have to tell you, and you can just ask AI, that heavy shorting absolutely can drive stock prices down. I've had shorts try to gaslight me on that over the years and say shorting is unrelated to the stock price. Not true. That is completely false. I'm willing to say that very confidently, that heavy shorting absolutely drives the stock price down. I have shown in videos, you can go find this. There's academic, peer-reviewed research that absolutely points to this type of shorting activity pushes price down. And you can just see it visually, right? Go from kind of where I'm pointing, if you can see my cursor here, and boom, you just spike the shorts while you drop the price, right? But so why? Why that timing is what you want to start asking. And I'm showing you that's when the ape conversion happened. But we're going to draw in FTX and some other things too. And then, by the way, the other thing that happened is as the strike was ending, you might recall that the movie industry had a whole strike for almost a year, and AMC had to fight its way through that too. So AMC's had the lockdowns and the strike. It's kind of been a double whammy over these past few years. Well, at the time the strike was ending, you would think shorts would say, oh, okay, the business is about to improve, I'm going to back away. But notice that it went the opposite way. Shorts spiked again. So every time AMC kind of has this opportunity to improve, shorts are piling on. You ought to be asking why, but we're going to keep going. Here's the other thing, though, that you need to understand about that timing. Shorts will say, well, there was dilution and that's why the price went down. But I want to point you to the overall value of the company in the stock market. So you might be aware of something called market capitalization, or the market cap. If you take all of the shares times the price of the shares, you can get what the market is valuing a company overall. And of course, you can see, kind of the January 2021 and the June 2021 spikes. Now, this is showing you kind of a weekly view. So I'm going to show you in a little bit that actually AMC even had a higher market cap than this at the spike. You can go Google this. You can find the historic market cap. There was one site that shows it quite a bit higher than this, but I kind of did the math and felt that number wasn't quite right. I think perhaps it had something to do with the reverse split that we're going to talk a lot about. But anyway, so you can see that AMC, of course, had I'll call it kind of gamma runs in 2021 and went very high with its market cap. And then here's that dip we talked about at the ape conversion. And you can just see what a hard line that is, right? You're supposed to be saying, hey, that doesn't look natural. Something's weird here. And it is indeed weird. So note, though, that it isn't just the stock price that went down, but this graph I'm showing you here is not stock price. This graph is the total value of all the stock in the marketplace. Pardon me, I'm going to take a quick drink here. So again, you should be asking, okay, wait, if at the time of this conversion, AMC was able to kind of consolidate all its shares, the APE and the AMC. There was a lot at that time, cash brought in, the business was improving. Why then would the stock market suddenly say, let's radically cut you in terms of your price? And that's what happened. So, and look at the timing carefully of when it happened too. So August 7th, 2023, the market cap was $8.5 billion. By the way, if you just math it out in terms of today's shares, how many shares are in the float, you would get that that's almost $17. So AMC's stock today would have to be $17 to match what it was on August 7th, 2023. Okay? So also be thinking about that when people are gaslighting you and saying, AMC's not going to run again, or it'll only run to, people put out different numbers. When we were in the middle of a mega lawsuit and all kinds of attacks and problems, and with the strike on the horizon, we were at what would be $17 today. And so that's this $8.5 billion market cap. And then so what happens? All right, so I told you about the lawsuit. So we have this big lawsuit, but it gets resolved with Judge Zern in Delaware. A lot of us were sharing a lot of information. I wrote a letter to the court. Many of you did too. We had kind of a public opportunity to share our voices. So all of that happened, and AMC gets the go-ahead for the APE to AMC stock conversion. You can see here's an Investopedia article on August 14th. Well, then what happens? AMC, the total value goes down over 20%. Just on news that we won the court case. Now you would think a company that wins a court case, that's positive, right? But AMC dropped 20%. And in the 2 weeks following the announcement, we dropped even 80%. And you cannot explain this with dilution. If you math this out, there was never anywhere near 80% dilution, but yet we dropped 80% just because we were doing this conversion. Now, my point of view is that was AMC winning. But again, hold on, because we're going to tie this to everything going on with FTX as well. And we're going to talk about naked shorting and a whole lot of other things. And you're going to see, I'm going to show you with data how AMC is insanely big. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So I just told you, post approval, you can see here at the top. So, at the bottom, 814. Okay. So we win the court case, and AMC's total value, remember, this is not just like stock price, this is the total market cap. So this factors in dilution, because here's the thing, even if you dilute a stock, the company itself should not be worth less money, right? It still has the underlying business value that it's delivering. And remember, then AMC is radically improving and has been on this trajectory to be a turnaround story, probably a turnaround story for the ages. I do still believe that. And so how then, if things are improving for the company, getting court cases behind it, access to capital, we were talking a lot about that back then, being able to survive then thrive, and yet the stock market is taking the overall value down. You cannot explain this with dilution. This is the total value of the company. So it drops 22%, and then the following week radically drops, right? So in 2 weeks, $6.5 billion of market capitalization just wiped out. Okay, so you want to ask, what happened? Now we know, I already showed you that the shorts happened, but that doesn't explain everything. So we had a radical amount of shorts, and you can see this spike right here, right? That's right there what happened. This almost looks like some kind of Bollinger Bands or something. Boom, short spike, price goes down. That's just sort of obvious. Like, you can literally see it there. I don't think you can argue that. But there is more to the story, and we need to look at that. First, let's kind of dive into something here. And then we're going to get to the heart of this video. In January 2021, I just want to kind of make you aware that AMC's market cap was kind of around $8 billion. We just talked a minute ago about how in 2023 it was as well, right? We're going to come back to that. So January 2021, we have the buy button taken away, which, by the way, reminder again, you're going to file all these things away in this video of just how big AMC has been and what a problem it is. And it should be revealing for you the level to which a broad network of people is willing to go to try not to lose against AMC in particular. So we have this market cap of 7.6 on that run. In today's price, that would be not quite $15, right? So we basically, to get back to that January spike, which, I'm suggesting is not much of a squeeze. I mean, we would run to $15 now. And I'm just saying, right, that doesn't seem all that out of reality. The trailing 12 months of sales, if you follow me a while, I've been talking about price to sales. You know that the team just reported yesterday our Q2 sales. If you look backwards 12 months, at that time, AMC only had $1.25 billion of sales in the year leading up to that. Well, now think about that. The quarter we just delivered was, I think, over 1.4 billion, or right around that. And so we've just delivered now, real time, here in 2025, a quarter that is bigger than the entire year that led up to the January 2021 run, right? That's a big deal. Now, June 2021, we ran even more. So now I'm showing you that bigger market cap at the top. At that time, it was $72, by the way. I was there. That was a fun day. The top of the day was $72. I think it might have closed at 68 or something like that. And by the way, you can see then in today's price, that's about $67. Like, it would not take a whole lot to get back to that. If we had some kind of mini squeeze now or something. And so the market cap was about 35 billion or 34 and a half. But now look at the trailing 12-month sales that had led up to that. That's even worse, because now you're swapping out the very beginning of 2020. There were still some theaters open. Then you get to the period where you have complete lockdowns, and AMC's revenue was only 880 million, not even $1 billion on a full year. We've almost doubled that just the last quarter. That's how much better we are now. And yet at that time, we ran to what would be $67 today. And then now we want to dial in. We're going to start to talk about what the heck happened, as I just was leading up to the ape conversion, the split, and all that. So I want to show you, before we get to that, I guess you just saw on some of the other slides, but if we talk about that $8.5 billion market cap, in today's dollars, that'd be that almost $17 a share. And let's look at the trailing 12 months of sales. So at that time, a little better. AMC's about $4.25 billion of total sales the year leading up to that. Now let's look at right now. And you just ask, does any of this make sense to you? Well, our market cap as of the close of today, as of me filming this video, this is kind of real time. We closed today, our market cap on most of, at least the couple brokers that I checked, $1.57 billion. And today's price at close, 307. Well, the trailing 12 months of sales that has just led up to this is $4.9 billion. So you can see far better than, granted the first two, that's more of a squeeze we're talking about. But even if we remove the squeeze discussion, in August of 2023, that was a different level of discussion. That's not a squeeze. That was, we're still fighting to survive. And compared to then, our market cap is, I don't know what this is, 1/5 or something. And the stock price, is less than 1/5. So you just start to ask yourself, what's going on when the trailing 12 months of sales are significantly better and our forward outlook is significantly better? In August of 2023, you got the strike starting to come around the corner, right? So I had made an FTD video. You can go out and find that, a whole video on, there's a video I made about market manipulation, and there's a video about FTDs. There's several things out there. I think I might even have a whole playlist on FTDs. Go check that out. And you need to know these things I'm going to show you, because in a minute, the SEC is going to contradict itself. And I want you to see, again, how big this is, that even the SEC is trying to hide from the AMC problem. So what had happened, I'm going to show you a summary, but you could see all this in those videos. Go to the FTD playlist. There was an academic article. Now, I told you I have 2 master's degrees. So one of the benefits from that is I still have access to academic research. I have my login still. I get to go to whole libraries of academic articles. I have read articles about FTDs. I've read articles about cost to borrow, all kinds of articles about just you name it that we've dealt with in AMC and GameStop in particular. I have gone and taken the time to go look at academic research on these topics. So we're not just talking about people on the internet yelling at you. We're talking about deep, Harvard type level research that is peer reviewed. Well, so here's a quote from one of those academic articles. Naked shorts have a severe market impact. Severe. Okay. And so then you go forward, the SEC itself. All right. This is SEC sworn testimony saying, naked short selling masquerading as routine fails to deliver. And they had a growing concern at that time. So the SEC, you can see this is October 2003. There's a whole suite of rules that were brought in, Reg Show. And then reminder that Wall Street as a whole, sort of the banking industry and the brokers and all of that, is basically self-regulated. And by the way, shorts are self-reported. Right? So there's a massive, massive problem in our markets. There is motivation to not tell the truth. There's financial incentive to not tell the truth. And there's the ability. When you have, means, motivation, and opportunity, that's how a prosecutor prosecutes a crime, right? These guys have billions or even trillions of dollars lining up behind means, motive, and opportunity. Well, the SEC knew it. The SEC themselves said, basically, failures to deliver are effectively naked short selling. Short selling. Guys, I'm struggling to say that. And recall in 2021, we had a big issue with AMC trading off exchange in something called dark pools. Not everything off exchange is dark pools. That's for another video. But at that time, the president of the NYSE herself, who later was moved out of the NYSE, you can guess why, said the quiet part out loud, that supply and demand is not showing in the price, that we were not having true price discovery. So you've got all of this naked short selling as basically failures to deliver. You've got supply and demand issues where you're not having true price discovery. Ken Griffin since then is on video saying, as a market maker, he decides what the stock price should be. Is that the marketplace you want? And we're going to keep going because this rabbit hole goes really, really deep, and you need to see the data. And I'm going to show you the data. We're almost there. All right, so but something changed with the SEC. I just showed you, and here is that, zoomed in a little bigger, that the SEC themselves were saying that naked short selling through the lens of failures to deliver is abusive. And I did a whole video about how it was used to try to manipulate stock and actually move the longs out of a stock. They've been trying to get us out of this stock for a very long time. And that is why I don't use stock price as the scoreboard. Someday I will love it when we win. But so here's the thing. That's the SEC then saying, yes, this is a massive issue to the point we need new regulations, and it is, causing systemic problems. Here's the thing. I went to pull the FTD data, and I am telling you, I pulled all, and I mean all, of the FTD data from 2021 forward. So I basically pulled 5 years of data. If you go to the website, you'll see how much I had to do, because that is 2 files a month for almost 5 years. So I pulled, I don't know what we're at now, 50 plus files. Almost 60 files or more. Okay, so I pulled 60 plus files, and then I had to format all the data and all of that, right? So that's the level I was going to that I'm about to summarize then and show you. And if you go to the SEC's FTD site to go get that data, looky, well, so hold on. So then they said they've got these concerns, right? But now look what you get from the SEC site. Effectively, if you kind of zoom in on what I'm showing you on the screen here, in fact, why don't I find it and read it to you? Fails to deliver can occur for a number of reasons, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, fails to deliver are not necessarily the result of short selling and are not evidence of abusive short selling or naked short selling. Okay, sworn testimony in 2003, the need to create entire new sets of rules in 2003, saying it's because failure to deliver is abusive short selling and it's systemic and it's a problem. Now the SEC saying, actually, never mind. There's nothing to see here. Don't worry about this. Why do you think that is? And I'm going to show you. But before we go there, a reminder, I saw this in the feed today. So I was like, oh, perfect timing, because I was going to make this video. In 2012, Goldman Sachs accidentally basically released a bunch of documents that showed their internal strategy. Now remember, this is 9 years after. So the SEC says, hey, this is abusive shorting. This is naked short selling masquerading as fails to deliver. Goldman, 9 years later, actually says internally, go find this. You can Google this. You can go find this, that it is a strategy. It is not an accident. It is by design that there are times when they just don't want to bother locating a share to short. And you'll see some things about negative rebates and all of that. And it was their strategy to fail to deliver. Now, guys, what you need to understand when you sell something that you don't own and you don't ever go buy the share or even borrow the share, you are absolutely creating downward price pressure and you are creating false supply. If I go sell, my house 20 times, you can hear how stupid that is and how problematic that is and what it would do to my neighbor's house prices, right? I would be put in jail for that. These guys do it as a strategy. The SEC acknowledged it. Goldman Sachs acknowledged it. I don't have to prove this to you guys. But now let's look at the data. So now you understand if the SEC is saying this is abusive, if academic research is saying this is to manipulate price and create false supply, Goldman Sachs is saying this is a strategy. Let's look at the market. And I'm not just going to look at AMC, by the way. I'm going to show you GameStop and strategy and a few other stocks. Some of you like silver. I'm going to show you some things about silver. I'm going to show you some things about gold. All right, so we're going to dive into all of that. I want to show you 5 years of market manipulation in AMC. It's not truly 5 years. This is like 4.5. You can see at the bottom, this is January 2021 until now, okay, through July. It just has to do with the timing of when the FTDs are reported. And in a little bit, I'm going to show you this compared to other stocks. So I want you to stay locked in because I'm pretty sure your eyes are going to pop out of your head when you see AMC versus the rest of the market. You will, beyond a shadow of a doubt, understand how big the AMC problem is for these guys, okay? And I want you, especially those of you who've been on the fence, or if you catch this and you're in any kind of powerful position, whether money, politics, whatever, and you watch this and you sit there and do nothing, then I'm honestly accusing you of being part of the problem. Because you need to look at this data and you need to ask yourself, what is the net result on our overall society when we allow garbage behavior like this? It is not okay. So let's look at this. Now you can see, we know in January 2021, I think there was a day where the float was traded. Gosh, I don't even know. It was so many times. I don't know if it was 7 times, a dozen times. It was some insane amount of times that the float was traded. Well, that's that false supply. There is no way that shares were being found on exchange that were moving like that. That's not happening. And then sure enough, the buy button was removed the next day, right? So they knew they'd messed up. And we're going to talk again. I told you we're going to talk about FTX. Did you know that the Stokens, and Binance was involved back then, and CM Equity AG and all of that. Did you know that the stock tokens, Stokens, were created the night before the buy button was removed, right? So huge smoking gun that you need to know about. And so the FTDs in January, let me pause. We need to actually talk. I meant to talk a little bit about how to view FTDs. Again, in the FTD playlist, I've got a whole video that tells you how to accurately report on FTDs. Because one of the biggest data mistakes people make is they add them up. And I am adding them up here, and I'm going to explain why that's going to be okay in this video, because I'm going to show you a daily average. Okay, but what FTDs are, and you can see this on the SEC's website, they really are a balance at the end of the day. So if you add in your bank account today, let's say at the end of the day you had $1,000 in your bank account, and tomorrow you had $1,000 at the end of the day in your bank account, you wouldn't add them up and say, hey, I had $2,000 this month. You had an average of $1,000. You have an average daily balance, right? So we are going to end up talking about the average daily balance, but it still does matter if we at least compare apples to apples with other tickers and you see total across each of these months. This is a monthly view. How much, so I am adding them up for this chart. I want you to know that, and I want you to know why that's technically wrong, but I also want you to just understand directionally what was happening in the marketplace. And then you could just do the math, right? Divide by basically a month and you'll get the daily average. And I'm going to show you that, all right? So for those of you sharp eyes, understand I know how to accurately report on FTDs, and that is important. For those of you who are newer, go check out the FTD playlist. You'll learn that. All right, so but you can see January 2021, June, then we had actually, interestingly, look from June to June. So the 1 year anniversary, you had a significant spike. You know, we talk a lot about swaps, right? Derivatives and various credit swaps and default credit swaps and things like that. I would not be overly surprised if there is a reason, sort of a method to the madness of the fact that we, at a 1 year anniversary of that June run, had a spike in FTDs, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And then we're going to talk about what's going on here. Your eyes should be going like, wait a sec. All right, so for kind of a year, they got low again. But then, whoa, look at these months here. Why is there this spike? Why is there this mega spike? And then why is there this, like, astronomical into the, stratosphere spike? And then over here, right? We're going to talk about all those, okay? So actually, here we go. So we talked about January and June 2021. So keep in mind, ground yourself. The SEC says failures to deliver, abusive short selling, price manipulation. Goldman Sachs says, actually, it's a strategy of ours. Academic research says, abusive short selling, systemic issue, extremely problematic, right? So you need to understand when you see these spikes, what was happening to AMC. And I'm going to show you GameStop as well, and so how that all compares and all that, right? So you know about January and June of 21. I told you about the anniversary. I guess I don't have a bullet for that. But now look what happens. What is this period here where things started to creep up and get a lot bigger? And you can even see just month after month of being kind of significantly bigger than anything we'd had for a while. Well, the ape conversion was announced around this time and then was executed in August. So you can see here's July 2022, right? Boom, there's August ape conversion, and then it keeps climbing. And then what else happened? FTX collapsed. So I talked to you about the tokens were created the night before the buy button was removed back here. We've talked about all these failure to deliver as a strategy. And, Brett Harrison from FTX, SBF, they're on the record as saying, hey, we had these tokens, but they were backed 1-to-1 by AMC. I don't swear on this channel, but boy, I want to, because that is nonsense, baloney, bald-faced lies. They did not back these things 1-to-1. There were not enough shares that even existed if you look at how many tokens were out there. Not even close, okay? And so you see what happens. I have a whole playlist called The Great Unwinding. If you study that, you'll understand that I believe Ape was actually part of defeating FTX. I literally believe Ape blew up FTX. And sure enough, Ape is announced, Ape gets created, 3 months later, FTX goes down. And I'm going to show you in a minute that AI kind of agrees with me. We're going to talk about that, okay? But note then, when FTX goes down, what follows, nothing else was going on here. We have this big spike. And so actually then you jump to the AMC, the Ape to AMC conversion actually is up here. So I should have drawn that a bit different, but you have this build up to the conversion. You have FTX has gone bankrupt. That's actually here. So pardon me that the slide is wrong, but let's just keep going. The actual AMC, the Ape to AMC conversion, look at how radical the failure to deliver spike here. Now, remember, right? Let's even just go back. Okay. Let's go back. Here. Now, everything I told you, let's think about what the SEC said, what Goldman said is their strategy, what academic research has said that absolutely naked shorting impacts the stock price. Look at this dip in price, and now let's go back, okay? Look at this radical spike in failures to deliver. You cannot tell me that these failures to deliver, coupled with AMC's stock overall market cap going radically down, that those are not related. I mean, if you believe that, the old saying, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you, because it's just obvious. You can line these up. The timing completely aligns. It's insane. And then, I just talked about, there's one more. Kind of our second biggest spike ever was when Kitty showed up. So that's interesting, right? So Kitty shows up and boom, we have this mega spike in fails to deliver. I think they were trying to prevent a squeeze. That's my honest point of view. That's opinion. I can't totally prove that, but that's my opinion. And then we get pinned, right? So the rest of the story in terms of the stock. Now let's zoom in a little bit though. Let's look at the Ape and FTX era. So you have, I told you already, there's that anniversary of June. So here's June of 2022. Then you can just see, look at compared to where we'd been for a while. FTDs, this is, by the way, if you compare it to any other stock, all of these, what I'm calling small months, are still radically high. This is insane levels, and you're going to see that in a minute. How much higher AMC is than the entire rest of the market. All the rest of the market. There is nothing that compares to AMC. You're going to see that. I'm going to show you that with data. All right, but so we get Ape actually gets created here. Here's August 2022. And so you can see a little bit high as kind of maybe the announcement comes out. Big spike here after it's created. Remember the day that Ape was created, I think it halted maybe 12 times. So that is another thing I could do a whole video on all the halts AMC has experienced. And you GameStop apes would understand that as well. We get halted and we get controlled, right? And so then it wasn't just when Ape is created though. Look at these follow-on months and we stay high. We don't quit. But now the FTX collapse happens 3 months after Ape is created. Again, go look at my Great Unwinding playlist. I talk a lot about all of the mechanics related to some of this stuff, and how it even ultimately ends up relating to Ethereum and Bitcoin. And then what you need to know, we're also going to talk about this a little bit, is that AMC's cost to borrow then spikes over 1,000%. And I'm going to show you some data on that and how just not real that is. Like how it's just, what I'm saying is it was real, but how it should not be real. It should not exist. That type of thing just doesn't happen. And even I got AI to kind of say, I don't have a clue. Like I can't find anything like this. So AMC's, in terms of an exchange traded stock, spiking above 1,000% cost to borrow. So here's the thing, connect some dots. Ape goes live, our failures to deliver spike, FTX crashes, our failures to deliver spike even more, and our cost to borrow. So if you think, all right, Goldman Sachs said as a strategy, they don't want to bother locating shares to short. We have talked a lot about how some of us believe they were using these tokens as locates. And you see, FTX goes down, failures to deliver spike. They're just like, forget it, I just won't locate anything, which is creating false supply. And that is then going to be timed to our price depression, right? And so that all happened. That's real. I'm just showing you facts. All right, so I want to back up for a minute before I talk about this some more. I'm gonna show you some of the research over time, especially if you're newer here, and then we're gonna come back to finishing up with data again. So here's the thing, we knew, this is in 2021, you could find me on Reddit, that I had posted a pretty deep dive about tokens, about stock, securitized token offerings, STOs. You can see that's up here, STO. And you can see this was tied to Citadel. This was tied to Interactive Brokers, who also had removed the buy button. This was tied to T0 and Mark Cohodes, Binance, Synthetics, all of that. So go take a look at this DD. I'm just letting you know. And when I say we, I mean, I don't think anybody, it's not a pat on the back. I'm just going to say a point of fact. I don't think anybody ever posted the level of DD that I did on these tokens back then. This is, November 2021, when Mark Cohodes had come around, was trying to take over the AMC community, and I just decided I had to stand up and be loud. And so I posted the DD, and you can see we knew this was a tokenized, this was basically a synthetic stock printer, is what this was. This was absolutely a way to create synthetic stocks. We were calling it out in 2021. And I was showing how this was what I believed was the failsafe for defeating AMC. I'm not going to go through all that. It's a very long article. Go find that on Reddit. By the way, it's pretty tough to just Google it. So you can see it's digital assets for AMC. You go find me, stock_retail. I've got it pinned. It's the first thing up there. So that should also tell you something. I've got several articles on Reddit that if you flat out Google the article title, sometimes they don't even show up. The other one was when I called out Chanos and Gasparino for posting a picture of an empty theater, but it was from 7:20 in the morning. So I was saying, hey, that's kind of proof of their short and distort tactics. If you Google the title of that article, it does not come up in a search, even though you can find it in my profile. But anyway, so we knew FTX, Stokens, Binance, Citadel, this box exchange, a whole lot of things. We knew about it. What you need to know then too, let's tie all of this together, guys. See how big this is. Congress, there was I think it was 8 of them, maybe, I don't know. This is Emmer. He loves to pretend he's for retail, and I love to remind everybody that he himself asked the SEC to ignore FTX. When Gary Gensler was there, when SEC was starting to look at FTX, Congress wrote a letter and made it public and said, we want you to leave them alone. And then, of course, since then, everything you found out, all of the fraud, all the manipulation, all the, frankly, bribery, all the money laundering, that all was going through FTX and tied then to AMC as well. These people in the halls of power were asking the regulators to turn a blind eye to everything going on. I think that matters. I think you need to know that and see how big this is. All the people who really hate me, here's just a couple examples. Many of you in AMC, you'll understand who Coors is, you'll understand who Randall is. They were literally trying to say, Randall was saying Stokens were not even a thing. He also was praising Sam, Sam Bankman-Fried. Coors literally, look at this. At one point, I think Coors called Sam retail savior. And here's Randall calling Sam credible. and Coors even like signed up and was trying to get you all on FTX, right? He was literally pumping it. This was what was going on with people who claimed they like AMC, right? They were kind of pushing you this whole direction of the Stokens. And then what was happening is Mark Cohodes, billionaire short, known for a lot of abusive activities. You can go find all kinds of reports on him on the SEC. Again, don't take my word for it. You can go find this stuff. It's in the files of the SEC, showing all kinds of manipulation he's done over the years on various shorts he's taken. Well, he worked with the media. Gasparino was saying, hey, literally the only way that AMC can win is to do what Cohodes tells you. Well, understand, Cohodes is a short. And what did Cohodes connect to? Overstock, Box, T0, all the things that actually connected to Citadel. Citadel was a part owner in Box, all of that. So that's why this DD I posted that I just referenced a minute ago really mattered. What was happening is, so just tie all of this discussion, the fails, the Stokens, the fact that billionaires were coming at us and getting on Fox and saying the apes must do this, AMC must do this. They were trying very, very hard to get over the top and get AMC under this kind of umbrella that they controlled, right? So that's just part of the story you need to understand, and part of what I was fighting. I mean, you can see these posts are November 2021 and all that was going on then. Okay, but now a couple other just kind of data points that are just sort of interesting. These are a little bit secondary. There, FTX went through the bankruptcy process. Here was one claim that was a $1.7 trillion claim. That was pretty crazy when we saw that. And oddly enough, at that time, the U.S. government had also just posted a deficit of 1.7 trillion. So it was really interesting to see some of these numbers tying and like, what the heck is going on? Then another thing that was happening is, now you could almost say this is normal behavior, but a lot of hedge funds were engaging in buying these claims, the bankruptcy claims. I'm not going to say that's fully a smoking gun, but I just am letting you know that did happen. And you need to understand that when FTX went down, AMC's cost to borrow twice spiked above 1,000%. And something else you need to know, I'm showing you here on the screen, there was an FTX Wall Street Bets tokenized futures index. It was a basket, had GameStop, I think it probably had BlackBerry, I can't remember who else. And if you looked, you saw that AMC was actually the largest percentage of that token, and it jumped like one day, it jumped like 8,000%. This is when all of this was happening. So FTX goes down, this token that's got AMC in it jumps 8,000%. So clearly somebody wanted it. AMC's cost to borrow spiked above 1,000% twice. Are you hearing the radical activity that was happening, all connected to Stokens, all connected to FTX, and all connected to failures to deliver? So let's go back and talk through a little bit of that again. So when APE was announced, the other thing that you need to know that happened, every YouTuber was against it. So now this is kind of before I could have considered myself a YouTuber, and I've always blanched at that term because it's come to be a derogatory term, because those of us in AMC understand almost everyone who came at us through YouTube ended up flipping on us or selling us really bad ideas. And what happened was we saw dozens, like, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but like Roach Capital and Coors and I'm forgetting some of the names, Jackson something, if you guys remember him. There was just like a dozen YouTubers who all literally said, Ape is bad, sell, sell, sell. They literally were saying sell. So forget saying no financial advice. They were literally telling you, get out, don't hold Ape, get away from this thing. And you need to remember, I've got a whole video on market manipulation and how a kind of a playbook on market manipulation, which you can find online too, right? So this stuff is published by people who had engaged in market manipulation. So one of the things from that in the playbook is you need to know when a whole group of accounts all emerge, all kind of saying the same thing and sounding like they're reading from a script, it's because they are reading from a script. And so who gave them the script you're supposed to be asking? So this is one more thing around Ape, that all at once, all in unison, saying the same thing, all these accounts said, I don't like Ape, get away, get away, get away. And then we already talked about how Ape plus 3 months, the FTX collapse, and the cost to borrow spike. So let's get back to some data. So let's really tie in then So now we've zoomed back out. I showed you the zoomed in version of the ape conversion and FTX, but I just want to remind you then, you see when it's announced, we jump. When it happens, we jump. When FTX goes down, we jump. And then when the actual ape conversion happens, we have this mega spike. And you saw, I don't have to go back to that chart again, but you saw that our price got pinned ever since, using these fails to deliver. It's clear. And, just here's what I want to show you now. I've told you I was going to show you against the rest of the market. This is real, guys. Now, this is a daily average. So this is a little bit more accurate way of reporting FTDs, because I told you it's a balance at the end of the day that is reported to the SEC. This is the 4.5-year average. And actually, if I stopped this about a year ago or so, it would look even more pronounced. Since AMC's been pinned, there hasn't been quite the same level, but it's still very high. So here are a select group of companies. I pulled all of these. I also sometime am going to talk about another company, someone I'm kind of watching that I think could be a decent person. And so I'm going to maybe release some information on FTDs, because now I've got these 5 years. I can show some things that have been happening in different tickers. I've got this like master huge spreadsheet I have pulled, just a big data dump. All right, so look at the daily average for AMC. It's like 790 plus thousand. So it's basically 800,000 shares a day, every day, sitting in the balance, let's say, sitting in the account with the SEC that have not been delivered for 4.5 years. And now just look at the size comparison. And a lot of us love GameStop, myself included. I love Kitty, deepest respect and admiration for him. And yet the data, you cannot ignore this data of who has been getting attacked. It is AMC. Look at GameStop. I don't know, that's about 40 plus thousand, maybe 50,000 a day. I had pulled, I do not support this ticker necessarily. In fact, I saw some negativity from some people. I'm not pushing this ticker. I just had pulled it because it's been in the news lately. Open Door has a lot of FTDs as well over the years, but I am being very cautious about that. Please do not hear me as saying somehow I'm promoting any of these tickers. I'm not. On here, I love AMC and I love GameStop and I love strategy, but nobody has had to deal with what AMC has had to deal with. In fact, if you look at 2023, when I talked about that ape conversion, and I think it matters. I think we need to look again. Hang on. I want you to just really look at that price. Boom. That line right there, okay? That is 2023. And now, come back and look at this stat again. Oops. That AMC, of these tickers, just these tickers, not the whole market, of these tickers, AMC was 94% of all FTDs in 2023. There's AMC and there's nothing else. There's not even a second place. In 2023, when we did the ape conversion, and it's not like for 1 month, it was for months on end. So it's not like you could say, well, they just had to go find the shares at first because of the conversion and all of that. And we had, kind of a dividend to settle, there's a settlement. You could maybe try to gaslight me into saying, all right, after 2 weeks, maybe even 3 or 4 weeks, takes a minute to clean it all up. This was months on end, okay? The whole year, 94% of all the FTDs in these 7 tickers was AMC. That is how big the problem is for AMC. And this number you're seeing on the chart is a 4.5-year number. You'd think things would even out over 4.5 years, right? 4.5 years, almost 5 years now, they have been strategically failing to deliver AMC shares and creating false supply. I am leveling the accusation that basically almost the whole market is cheating. And I'm waiting for someone to decide it's not okay, we're going to do something about this, right? And you can do that, let's say, as a retail advocate. When a guy like Kitty starts throwing his weight around, stuff happens, right? You can do that as a politician and say, good God, we're going to put some people in jail. You can do that as a regulator, same thing. I feel passionate that too many of you are ignoring the real problem. Now, let me be careful, Guys, if you're in AMC, you know how much I believe, and we are going to finish with some positives here. I just want to show the size of the problem. And I want to show, especially those of you who've been getting gaslighted, I want you to see I am not wrong. This has been happening. This is data. You can fact check me easily on this. I pulled this from the SEC's website. Everything I've been sharing has been a factual thing that happened. You know, I've kind of tried to tell you when I'm sharing opinion, but almost 95+% of this video is not opinion, it's fact. And so I do want you guys to know, especially AMC apes, this is actually bullish. I know it doesn't sound bullish, but I want you to understand 4.5 years of them desperate to keep us from winning. And yet our business is improving, and Adam Aron has not let this ship sink. He has not let the ship sink. He could have many, many times. You guys understand, we made it through lockdowns. We made it through 2021. We made it through all these fails to deliver. We made it through the strike. Our business is improving. That's why I believe in a man who has suffered the slings and arrows. He gets attacked all day, every day, and has not let this business go under. But I want you guys to just lock in and go, man, if they are that desperate to fight us, we're going to win, and we're going to teach them a lesson, even if we get no white knights who help us. But I will also tell all of you potential white knights, I'm actually kind of angry at you. I think you are derelict. I think you have waited too long. I think you have done too little. And I think it's starting to be on your heads, because if you have the power to act and you understand the problem and you do nothing, then you have become part of the problem. And I mean that. But let's keep going. Here's AI's opinion on this. I asked Grok, I hid some slides because I took a bunch of screenshots of what Grok did. I said, listen, I want you to go look over the past, since January 2021. And I want you to find, I specifically said an exchange traded stock, because you'll find OTC stocks can be really weird and act really weird, right? So this is not an over-the-counter stock. This is an exchange traded stock on the NYSE. Grok could not find a single stock that had hit 1,000% cost to borrow. And Grok confirmed AMC hit it twice, what I already told you. So you can go fact check me on that. Couldn't find a single stock. It said, I think GameStop hit maybe 200% once, might have hit 300% another time. So that was a big deal. Only AMC even approached 1,000 and actually crossed it twice. Remember everything I've said about these fails with FTX. Now, I also asked a different question. I said, hey, in your opinion, basically, can you correlate the FTX failure? Now, granted, I just showed you with data and timing, right? So there's a lot of anecdotal evidence there, circumstantial evidence that connects the timing. You cannot deny the timing. In terms of the tokens before the buy button, in terms of FTX going down after Ape was created, in terms of the cost to borrow and the fails spiking when Ape converts, all of that. That's just factual timing. But I also asked, hey, in your opinion, not opinion, I just said, hey, could you correlate FTX and these cost to borrow spikes and the fails to deliver? And if you go do this exercise yourself, you will find that in particular, through the lens of Alameda, you'll remember the bank, several banks that went under and all that was going on as well with Alameda, that yes, it gave a very clear yes answer, a lot of detail on why perhaps the issue with Alameda and the not backing the tokens one-to-one with shares. And by the way, I didn't even put in this, one of the things that SBF, it came out in the trial, was that FTX was allowing Alameda to run up to a $65 billion negative account with FTX. Now, that number should be ringing in your ears, right? Because how many times have you heard about Citadel and their 65 billion sold not sold not purchased, whatever, basically naked shorts effectively. That's my belief. Sold not purchased, they're shorts, right? So there's 65 billion at Citadel, there was 65 billion at Alameda. It's kind of like, I think they're just moving this pig in a python thing and just moving the problem all over the place. That's just a kind of a guess. That's speculation on that one. That's not fact. But AI does say, yes, I see the link, and in particular through Alameda. And AI saying AMC running to this 1,000% cost to borrow and AMC having these fails to deliver is a sign of severe market dysfunction and, actually, I think it even said likely. I said possible. Likely manipulation. right? You need to understand what's been happening to AMC. So when people just try to point you at the stock price and say you're losing, that's not what's been happening. And you need to understand how big this is. And so we've talked about, the market cap and the sales, and now look at what's happening with the FTDs. This is what I want to show you, right? So I talked about how in January, for that month, now we're back to kind of adding them up. So you got it in your mind. Remember, why don't we divide by how many days and get to an average daily balance? That'd be a little more accurate, but you just get just notionally kind of the direction of the size of what was going on. So in January, total of 72 million. In June, you see that 46.5 million. Now look at what happened around the conversion. In August, 265 million fails to deliver. But now look at, if I took the months before, June and July, and the month after, so if you take June, July, and September, you get 443 million. If you take then a few months later, kind of have this like 3-month sort of issue, you get 145 million in December through February. And then, if you go April through July of 2024, you get another 300 million. AMC is attacked through fails to deliver, tokens, and a host of other things. You need to understand this, okay? In the meantime, we're kind of moving then, let's say, to the third act of this video. We're just about done. While this price suppression is happening, you're thinking about, well, the price keeps going down. Here's our debt over time. Many of you have seen this, so I'll go quickly. But and Adam actually repeated this on CNBC today. You can see in 2019, pre-COVID, AMC's debt was way up at this yellow line. Look at where we are now. So our debt is, I'm including the 143 that was paid off in Q3. So if any of you try to fact check this off the balance sheet, you have to take the balance sheet that was just turned into SEC yesterday. It'll show like 4.097, I think, 4.09 something. And then take 143 off of that, and you'll match this chart. Okay, so this is accurate. You can fact check me. Just take the 143 because it was paid in July, which is Q3. So we're way below, like $1.1 billion below pre-COVID in terms of debt. So AMC is healthier, right? So you're asking like, why then is the market cap far lower? Why is AMC's overall value far lower? If the sales are better, the debt is better, all of the underlying fundamentals are better. I've got a whole playlist on fundamentals as well. All right. What else have we seen in AMC though? So we've had thousands, and yes, I'm saying thousands, of negative articles in these 4.5 years. Whether you want to look at Seeking Alpha, Motley Fool, The Street, Market Beat, you just CNBC, MSNBC, whatever place you go, you're going to find negative article after negative article, all with these. Now stack all these things, right? Any one of these things by itself might not be that big a deal, but you say, okay, there's all the fails to deliver, there's all the tokens, there's all the cost to borrow issues, there's all of the thousands of articles being run. Some of these by, arms. Motley Fool is like an arm of a hedge fund, right? So you talk about short and distort. The same people going short own these media arms who are distorting, short and distort, right? And so then multiple hedge funds going under. It's a long list, actually, guys, of people who came up against us and went under. Credit Suisse obviously being one of the big ones. That's not really a hedge fund. But by the way, badge of honor, I am blocked online by Credit Suisse. They blocked me on X. Just again shows you how big AMC's problem is, or how big of a problem AMC is. We've had all these open campaigns. Cohodes came in. I'm even alleging that there were various promises and payroll and different actions that have happened against AMC. That's been an ongoing discussion. You can see whole networks. Chanos, Shkreli, he's the pharma bro, Credit Suisse, Citi, Greenfield. Greenfield and Kramer had me blocked when I was completely a nobody. It's not for nothing that on the opening slide I used that nobody too that's coming out. I had maybe 200 followers. I had never even said Kramer's name. I didn't even know Greenfield existed, and these guys had blocked me. You ask yourself, okay, how big of a problem is AMC that somehow they found this needle in a haystack and they blocked me? And I think now that we know a lot of things about U.S. aid and some other things, I think they knew who was not on payroll, so they just blocked me. I'm going to apologize. I'm calling Pulte out here. He was part of that. He brought in, basically the moment he came, a bunch of people flipped and started consorting with the worst of the worst in terms of people who have attacked us. That is a fact that happened. I do want to give Pulte credit, so let me just say that out loud. In this administration, I've seen that he's working on behalf of Bitcoin. That's something I value a lot. So I will give people credit when I see that maybe they're turning around. But that was part of our story. Like, it happened. It has to be discussed. A lot of anti-AMC accounts became million plus follows. Like, it was the formula. If you flipped on Adam, if you flipped on AMC, if you attacked Adam, a lot of them attacked me, then they got to millions of follows. Well, go check mine. I've been here the whole time. I've been asked by dozens and dozens of you, like, how come you're not bigger? I think you know the answer. Like, I understand I'm trading in conspiracy there. I can't prove that, but I do believe you know the answer. When some of you tell me consistently, even though you have like alerts for me on YouTube, it doesn't pop up. Sometimes you can't find my videos, you can't find my articles. This stuff is real. Those are facts. I've seen people prove to me that stuff's happening. We have this constant online infiltration, people sort of pretending they're apes. We've had all kinds of negative space call hosts who end up just giving the microphone to a barrage of shorts. You understand everything that's happened to us with YouTubers and all of that. There's this constant misinformation. People were saying you couldn't convert ape. People were saying ape was not one-to-one. People said Kitty unfollowed Adam when he had never followed him in the first place. People constantly talked about cash burn when we were turning cash flow positive. Got all the receipts on all of that, and that I was the one showing you we were going to be positive, all of that. We've had all the false decoders, on and on and on and on. The endless lawsuits, the whole Project Popcorn thing. Those people are kind of the worst of the worst, and we're all connected to cohodes on that one. All kinds of online bullying. This is not something you do when a stock is not a problem, right? I want you to remember everything that's happened, and especially go back to all those data slides on the fails to deliver. It's not by coincidence. And you know what, though? I will say in sort of a bullish point, I really ask myself, did AMC really ever squeeze? Did shorts ever actually cover? Did they buy to close? Or did we just run on the options chain back then and kind of a little bit of FOMO? If you look at Forbes back then, this is after our June run. AMC and GameStop still set up for a short squeeze. If you look at Seeking Alpha, one of the few things that snuck through that might be true, this is also in June of 2021, no evidence of a short squeeze. Didn't happen. So I don't know. We'll see. We're going to find out someday. History's going to end up telling us. And I just ask you, with the radical spike in shorts and this dip in price, so look at, it's like 70% of the shorts got added while we were down here. And remember, reverse the thesis with shorts. You want to basically buy a short high and sell it low. In other words, short when the stock is high. They should have been shorting here. Why are they shorting here? You know why, but you should remind yourself constantly, because you are constantly given all kinds of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So you need the data. I say facts over FUD. This matters. This grounds you in, holy crap, they have a real problem. They're not acting like rational people. All these failures, all the Stokens, all the shorts when the price is low, all the online manipulation, all the bullying, paying people, suppressing, all these things are real. So given we had these sky-high failures to deliver, way higher than anything else in the market. Basically, AMC is the market of fails to deliver. Consistently timed to key events in AMC's history, and now timed to price pinning. We've been pinned for a couple of years. You've heard of seller boxing. You know what that is. We've got this broad network of campaigns, attacks, lawsuits. We've got FTX, Stokens, this huge cost to buy outlier that has not happened in any other stock. The buy button removal, obviously not just us, that happened to several stocks. All of the overseas activities, I don't want you guys to sleep on things that happen in London and Hong Kong and Frankfurt, because actually some of the dirtiest activities are happening outside the US because people are trying to hide from our, let's say, governing system. All the things we know about options chain manipulation, we had retail advocates trying to gaslight us and saying there's no manipulation of the options chain, which is baloney. You can pretty much prove that too. We had all kinds of other observable phenomenon. Pay for order flow, high frequency trading and wash sales, all the algo signals. You can go back and find all kinds of posts from me on X from 2021 and 2022 where I literally could predict exactly what was happening with the price because I watched the level 2 trades And you could actually see that the algos were signaling when the stock would go up, when it would go down. I literally was calling it. I had the integrity not to trade it because I believe that's wrong. I don't think you should be able to just signal and then, help your friends kind of cheat the system. And so that was real, though. All of a sudden, you would see these numbers in the L2s that told me exactly what was going to happen with the stock. And I was calling it out, and I was right. That's a thing that's been happening to us. So the question has to be asked, given that set of facts, that set of information, and all we've gone through, if one wanted to defeat, let's say, a dark cabal who is against, in my opinion, the people, why would you ever ignore AMC? Why would you not roll up your sleeves and say, I'm picking up my sword and I'm getting in this fight? Because you see what they're doing to us. That question is begging to be answered. Now, as for retail, 2 of the last 3 quarters, we delivered positive cash flows. Let's turn bullish here, guys. This is real. These are facts. 2 of the last 3 quarters, positive cash flows. That is death for the shorts. I can hold longer than you can stay solvent, and this company is not going bankrupt. Q4, we're going to, guys, we have, well, here's the list. Let me read this list on this second bullet. This is just a selection. This is not even all the movies. Avatar, Zootopia 2, Wicked 2, SpongeBob, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, The Running Man, Tron Ares, The Black Phone 2, Mortal Kombat 2. I don't know if you understand yet how big Q4 is going to be. And as Adam has said, then Q1 is actually better than a normal Q1 because we get some rollover from some of these. And then the rest of 2026 is just off and running. So Q4 is going to make 3 out of 5 quarters. We're going to have positive cash flows. And then 2026, further growth. And I'm suggesting we're probably going to be full year positive, maybe even full year positive on earnings. I kind of think that. Now that's about AMC, but here's the thing too, broader. I know I've made a big appeal here in terms of the data saying AMC is a massive, massive problem for the cabal. But I believe in unity. I do. I won't share a couple things that have been more subtle signals I've sent. I'm going to fight manipulation and distortion where I see it. I believe in GameStop. I believe in strategy. I believe in Bitcoin. There's some other things popping up. I don't believe in this nonsense about having to pick one ticker and say, we only fight for GameStop or we only fight for AMC. I want an end to cheating and corruption and dishonest scales. And I honestly want even spiritual justice on some of this stuff. And that's what I'm here to fight for, which means I'm not fighting my fellow retail. And I hope you will join me in that and you start fighting the system and what's broken and not your brothers and sisters. So that's the call. But if you're in AMC, I just want you to know I believe this now more than ever. We will win. So let's go.